he enlisted in the military when he was 19? 70. He enlisted. And so he did some time in the military, and now my Uncle Alex is going to talk about a little bit about that service that he did in the military.
Yeah, he enlisted in 1944, and the reason I remember it so well is because I listened to your tape all morning long, Dad. If you remember about, I guess about 26 years ago, we were in high school, me and my brother Jesse, and we did a history project on what our parents did in the military. And since my dad had such a colorful history, he made this tape, and I listened to it all day. So let me just kind of talk about that. He enlisted February 2nd, 1944. He was 17 years old when he enlisted, so he had to get his parents' permission to enlist. And the reason he did that was because he wanted to get into cadet school, and so that was the reason he joined. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it through cadet school, and he went through a couple of schools and ended up going to gunnery school. And very quickly, he went through all that training, and he ended up, because of the war, he ended up in a combat unit. It was combat unit 7390, and they started out in Lincoln, Nebraska, and from there, he flew to Iceland and to Wales. Ended up going to Marrakesh and Algeria, so he ended up in Africa. And finally, he was based in Foggia, Italy, which is on is it the Adriatic? The Adriatic Sea. And from there, he was with the 15th Air Force, and he was in the B-17 squadron. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie The Memphis Belle. He was in one of those things, and I think if you've seen that movie, you begin to appreciate what he went through, because he was the shortest, and we know how tall our jeans are. My dad ended up being what they call a ball turret gunner, and the ball turret gunner, if you've seen a B-17, is the bottom, the bubble on the bottom, and what they do is they do high altitude bombing. And they have to get into this electric suit, so they can't wear shoes in the bubble, and it's kind of a hydraulic thing. I know my dad explained it to me once, and they're basically shooting a gun upside down, and they can go around. And so from there, he flew combat missions, and this was daylight bombing at that time, up at 30,000 feet. So this was high altitude bombing. They did bombing missions in Austria and Yugoslavia. And on his 18th mission, my dad was shot down. His plane was hit by flak over Linz, Austria. And so when he got hit by the flak, I guess the plane started to go into a tailspin. And my dad was trying to get out, and of course, he had to get out from his ball turret and get his parachute on. And according to what he told me was that at that point it didn't look very good because the plane was in a tailspin and he couldn't get out, and he was being buffeted around. Fortunately, I guess they had come down to about 10,000 feet, and the fuselage of the plane split open, and he was able to bail out at that time, and he parachuted in the middle of winter. And I think it was around this time of the year, Dad?
Yeah.
December 28, 1944, right around his 18th birthday. He bailed out in barefoot. He didn't have any shoes, out into Austria, and he was picked up by the Home Guard, and he was taken around the site where the rest of his crew was, and he had to take dog tags out of some of the soldiers that had not made it, the chutes didn't open or anything, and put it on them so that family could be notified. From there, he was loaded into a train. I guess maybe a couple of weeks later, they were taken in boxcar from there to their prison camp. and they were taken in these boxcars, and they were unmarked boxcars. So when they were going on the railroad car, of course, the Allies were bombing and strafing a lot of those boxcars because they didn't know there was American soldiers in there. They thought maybe there were supplies for the war. And so the soldiers would run, close the doors, and lock the POWs in there. And fortunately, that nothing ever hit the train that my dad was in, the boxcar that he was in. I know he said that one time that the bombs were so hard that the trains would come off the railroad tracks. Okay, and so he got to his he got into his POW camp, and it was near a place called Luckenwald, Germany, which is about 30 miles southwest of Berlin. And there, the camp consisted of American, British, and Russian, and there was even, according to my dad, there was some Australians and some New Zealanders, right? Prisoners that were in POW camps. And their diet consisted of eating grass soup, which my dad thought he just thought it was wheat, and mush, and they had, was it German black bread. And one thing that they did serve them, which was a benefit to my dad, was they gave them what was called blood pudding. And being from the Southwest here, growing up out in New Mexico, he was used to that. And actually was something that was familiar to him. So a lot of the other GIs didn't really care for it. And so he traded some of his mush and stuff, and he could eat that, and so that's how he survived. During the time he was in the prison camp, my dad came ill, he got very ill, and he was sick for a while there, and he wasn't sure if it was malaria or what. But bad cold? Bad cold. And he had high fever, and he remembers one of the other guys from his crew, a man by the name of James Langdon. Was a ranger man from his crew, kind of nursed him back to shape and brought him back to health. So we thank him for helping my dad through that. And of course, they survived through that. At the point that my dad was in the POW camp, he noticed as he was there longer that the planes flying overhead were taking longer and longer. He said sometimes it would be 3 or 4 hours where he would see Allied planes flying over and you wouldn't see daylight. And he knew that it was near the end, the war was coming to an end. And he said that they would cheer, and the soldiers, the German soldiers, wouldn't try to stop them anymore because they knew it was close to the end. So that was one of the things that he talked about. And he also talks about one night that they heard a lot. I guess they got locked into their prison, and they heard a lot of shooting, a lot of artillery and gunfire throughout the night. And the next morning, when the sun came up, the Germans were gone and the Russians had come in. And so they were glad to be done with the Germans. Unfortunately, the Russians didn't let them go either because apparently there was a bounty that they collected from the United States for caring for the Americans. Of course, they were homesick and wanted to get home. So what my dad did was him and this other, I guess it was a British soldier, snuck out. At that time, they had a lot of horse-drawn carts, the Russians, and they were taking gasoline for petrol. 55-barrel drums. Yeah, and they asked if they could sneak on one of those. They snuck out of there and they started to walk across Germany, and they came to. They walked all the way to the American lines at Bitterfeld. And some of the memories of my dad's trip when he was walking over there is that fortunately he had enlisted the help of the British soldier because he knew the customs of the German people, and they weren't very helpful, and he knew where to get bikes and get transportation. You know, they would ask for food or eggs, and at one point they asked some German people if they had, you know, eggs and stuff like that, and they didn't want to give it to them, so the guy told them, well, I'm just going to go over and call the Russian soldier over here, and so they kind of panicked and brought out that. That was one of the things that my dad shared with me. And he got to the American lines in Bitterfeld, and from there they gave him peanut butter. They opened up peanut butter and bread and let him gorge on that. From there he was sent to the port of Lahore, a place called Camp Lucky Strike. And it was kind of a, I guess it was a reintegration camp for American POWs coming back from the war. And there they were fattened up, and that's what my dad said, fattened up, and then they put them on a Liberty ship, 17 days from France, took them into New York, and my dad came back, and we thank God he made it. And just to tell you, we're very proud of you, Dad. And,